Welcome to the tutorial on how to create a gorgeous floral initial with a border. Now if you have your Pixie kit, you have all the tools you need to get started, including the yarn that you selected to include in your kit. So let's get underway and make this gorgeous piece. The first thing we need to do is to get our stencil nice and central, so you can use a ruler and measure each side. I personally like to count the stitches either side of my stencil, and once I have even on both sides, I know that my stencil is nice and central. So once I've done that, you might need to give your fabric marker a little shake. You're going to go in and trace around your stencil. And once you remove your stencil, you might just need to go in with your fabric marker and just make that stencil a little bit bolder. First, we're going to thread onto our yarn our border color. Now this is whichever color you like. We're going to put on approximately 2 meters. There's no need for a fancy knot, just a tiny little tail off the edge of your needle is fine. And we're going to go in and start at the bottom here. The stitch we're going to use for this is called the chain stitch. You would have heard me do this many times before, but let's go through it again. So we're going to leave a small tail underneath, which we're going to tie off to. We're going to take our needle back down through the hole that we just came up from, and we're going to leave a gap of about 2 stitches. We're going to wrap our yarn around and we're going to pull through, and you'll see here that you've created your very first chain. Now once we've done that first chain, we're then going to take our needle again back down through the chain that we just created and up again, leaving a gap of around 2 stitches. Wrap your yarn around and pull through, and you'll see here now that you've created a second chain. And we're just going to follow this again, taking our needle through the chain we just created, leaving a space of around 2 stitches, wrap your yarn around and pull through. And this is the simple method that we're going to be using for the whole of the border. So let me show you again. We're going to take our needle through that chain we just created, leaving a space of around 2 stitches, wrap your yarn around and pull through. Now we're going to continue with this all the way now until we get to a junction, which is going to be a pointy bit. So for me, it's the top of the F here. And so now that I'm at this junction here, I'm just going to anchor this down with a stitch. And to do this, we're just going to pop our needle over the top of our last chain and pull it all the way through. Now I still have plenty of yarn left on my needle, so we're going to continue. All we're going to do now is to turn this corner. We're going to bring our needle up through our very last chain. So once we've brought our needle up, we're just going to turn the garment into the direction that we want to go in, and we're just going to continue chain stitching, this time just in a different direction. So when we pull the yarn through, you'll see here now we've created a nice corner, and it's not going to have that rounded look, it's going to have a nice sharp edge on the corner. And we're just going to continue like this all the way until we come to our next junction. And again, we can just anchor that down with a stitch over the top of the last one. And we're going to continue again because we have enough yarn to do this small section here. So we're just going to bring our needle up through our last chain that we did. And again, turning the garment the way that we want to face. We're going to then continue chain stitching until we come to our next junction, which is a tiny little bit here, so it's not a big stitch. And then we can anchor that down again. Now because we don't have a lot of yarn left on our needle, I'm just going to pop that off my needle now, and we're just going to rethread some more yarn onto our needle. And this is pretty simple. We've now topped up our yarn again, and I'm just going to go back up through the last chain that we just created again, pulling all the way through and leaving a small tail. But I'm now going to tie these 2 tails together, as this is now going to be tying off our first section. And now that we've replenished our yarn, we are just going to carry on stitching in the direction that we were going in. And this is exactly how you would do it if you wanted to change the colour, or again, if you just needed to top up your yarn. So we're just going to carry on stitching until we come to our next junction, which is going to be here. And then we're just going to do this all the way until we finish our border. And now that I've come to my final stitch, I'm just going to anchor that down by popping my needle over the last chain that I created. And then once we've finished our border, we can then flip our garment the other way. And you've got some tails here to tie off. So we've got 2 on the left and 2 on the right. That's nice and simple. We're just going to snip away any excess ends and we're just going to tie those into a triple knot. So now that our border's finished, it's time to fill in the inside with our daisy pattern. Now this is complete creative freedom, and I don't usually tutorial these because every letter is different and placement is completely up to you. However, I'm just going to show you how I do them, and you can maybe take some tips from it, or you can copy, or you can choose to put them wherever you like. I'm going to go in with a little half daisy here in the corner. I usually put a half daisy in all the corners. I've only got about half a meter of yarn on my needle, so leaving a tail underneath. And I'm just going to go in and do just a 3 or 4 petal daisy. Now, if you want to watch a slower tutorial on how to do a daisy, we have that on our YouTube channel. It might be a good idea to get familiar with how to stitch a daisy before you do this project. But I'm simply just going to use that bottom left corner as my starting point, and I'm going to take my needle back into it each time I create a new petal. Once we've done the petal, we're just going to anchor it down again by putting our needle over our last stitch. And I'm just going to pop a 3 petal daisy in this corner here. And once I've completed that, I'm just going to flip my garment over and I'll show you how we tie off our daisies. So I've got my threaded needle and I've got my starting tail, and these two need to be together so that we can tie them together. And to do that, we're just going to weave through our work. And now they're together, we can tie them in a triple knot and snip away any excess ends. So that's our first daisy. Now I'm going to pop another one just next to it, and I've got a little gap here on the right, so I'm going to stick a little petal in there and I'm just going to pop it into this section here. So it's a nice opportunity to change the color of your yarn. You can do different colors or you can stick to just one color. It's entirely up to you, but I'm just going to pop a little daisy into this section here now. And once my daisy is complete, I'm just going to snip away the excess ends and tie it into a triple knot. Now I've just jumped ahead here and put a few daisies in already. So this is just this section here. I'm going to pop a half daisy into this point here, and I've got a little gap next to the lavender flower, so I'm just going to pop my needle there where I want my petal to end. And I'm just going to pop one there and probably make this a 3 or 4 petal daisy, just a half daisy. And once I've finished my last petal, I'm going to do a tie off with a triple knot. Now in this little corner here is where I'm going to pop my last one for this section. So this one will probably be a 3 petal here. So I'm just going to go up to the top section, and then I'm going to anchor that one down. And then I'm going to pop my next petal just next to the white one. And now I've got this section here where I can fit a purple petal in just nicely. I suppose this whole project is kind of like a jigsaw really, and you just really need to fill the gaps with petals. So don't stress too much about whether or not you have a 3 petal flower or a 4 or a 5 or even a 6. It always works out in the end. So now that my garment is full of daisies, I'm now going to work on the centers of my daisies. So you just need to put a small amount of yarn onto your needle, whichever color you want to do your centers with. And the French knot can be a little bit tricky. So let's do it a few times to show you how I do it. And I hope that this method helps you. So we're going to lay our garment down. Now you're going to wrap your yarn around your needle 3 times, pinch it together between these 2 fingers, and then you're going to go under the garment. Now your hand that's under the garment needs to be ready for that needle. So you're going to go off from the center, pinch it between these 2 fingers here and hold it. And this is a really important part. While you're holding that, you're going to pull that bottom thread and cause that tension, which is going to tighten your knot. And whilst you're doing those 2 things, you're going to push your needle down. So it's 3 things all at once. And that's why these French knots are a little bit confusing. So when we flip over, we've got 2 tails there. We're just going to tie them together in a triple knot. Okay, let me show you that one more time. So we're going to go up through the center, and then we're going to lay our garment flat on the table. And I find this is a really helpful tip. You're going to wrap your yarn around your needle 3 times, pinch together between these 2 fingers, get ready with your left hand to grab your needle, pinch it between your left hand fingers, pull that bottom thread, and whilst you do those 2 things, you're going to push your needle through the center. And you've got a beautiful French knot. Let's do it one more time. Okay, once we've got all our centers, let's add our greenery. So for greenery, you're going to put a real generous amount of yarn onto your needle, and we're actually going to double it and put a little knot at the end. So we've got about 3 meters of green yarn on here, so you do need quite a lot because we want to try and get it all done in one big stitch rather than having lots of little knots everywhere. So to do your greenery, we're going to start at the bottom, pull your yarn all the way through, and then you're just going to pretty much fill in little green bits wherever you want to, really. This is your opportunity now to fill in all those final little gaps. Now to tie off, you're going to have your threaded needle still on, and you're just going to pop a little knot here, and then you can just weave your needle back through just a little bit of your work just to hold it in just that little bit tighter, and then you can snip away at the ends there. To remove your fabric markings, you're just going to spray with a water bottle and dab with a paper towel. Make sure to flat lay to dry, and you're all done.